Ashton, we're going straight in. It's great to see you. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Daniel. Appreciate you.
Now, my on my show, my daughter generally asks the first question, but she's not around, and it's a shame because I really wanted her to meet you and listen to some of your answers. But we will push on regardless without her. I've been doing a stolen science series, and you might find that a bit strange that a Bitcoin podcast would be touching on all of these things, but maybe you're coming to realize, because I know you've already been on Corey's show, Bitcoin Made Simple. You've been on Kayvan's show, Kayvan Devani, his Connector show, and he's a Bitcoiner as well. And sorry if you've been on other Bitcoin podcasts, and I'm not shilling them as hard as I should be, but as far as I know, this is definitely the third, maybe your fourth. And obviously, the Bitcoin angle is your theory around 0 point energy and drawing energy from the ether, and how can we use that, and what's the impact on Bitcoin mining and all of that, and does that usurp proof of work? And but I want to push all of that aside at the moment and come back to it. I have some thoughts on it because I want to get into the disappearance of MH370. And uh, it's kind of personal to my wife and I, because we flew out of Singapore that exact day to start a new life. We flew out of Singapore on that day with our four kids, and I'd quit my job in finance. I was working in foreign exchange markets. I came from the dark side, Ashton, to see the bright orange light, and that always stuck with me, obviously, because planes don't just go missing. And there was no answers, and no answers have ever come through. And I just kind of parked it until you come across my radar by a couple of Bitcoiner friends of mine. They're like, you've got to follow this guy and see what he's doing and check this out. And then I saw your video of the orbs, and I've been following you ever since. So let's take it back to that day. And of course, conspiracy theorists out there, whatever. Like, I'm so sick and tired of being called a conspiracy theorist when all I want to freaking know, and like you, I think, I'm tired of being lied at, and I want to know the truth. And what you're doing, the work you've done, is incredible. Um, that day, 8th of March 2014, MH370 takes off from Kuala Lumpur, and it's headed to Beijing. And I know you've been through the manifest, so let's start there because this is very key and important information. Who was on that flight? How many of them were on that flight? And why were they important and part of this story?
Yeah, there's a few suspicious passengers, including two Iranians that were using stolen passports on board this plane. And within like 1 or 2 days, they got dismissed as not relevant, which was pretty odd because one of the common theories was the hijacking scenario. Their story also makes no sense whatsoever. They paid, I think, tens of thousands of dollars for stolen passports and these tickets, and they claimed that they were going to Amsterdam as refugees, but they're flying to Beijing. None of that made any sense. But really, what you're getting at is the Freescale semiconductor engineers. And yeah, I'm not somebody who's really been huge into conspiracy theories historically. But when you happen upon something that's this massive, it's the answer that makes the most sense, which is just, there's something shady that happened with respect to this plane. And so the first thing you do is like, who's on this plane? You want to know. And there's 20 Freescale semiconductor engineers on board this plane. They were very important people, even according to the mainstream media reports about them. The company is an American company. You've got 20 of them, 12 of them are Malaysian nationals, and 8 are Chinese nationals, which should raise red flags because you've got foreign nationals working for an American company headed to Beijing. First thing people should be wondering about is like intellectual property theft here, because China steals a huge amount of intellectual property from the West and from America every single year. It's something like $600 billion or some huge number that's out there. So, one of the things, if you just start digging into them, is you find out right away, oh, well, they're also connected to US aerospace and defense. And they've also just come out with a microchip that's smaller than the dimple in a golf ball. There's a little bit of misinformation out there. You've probably seen this reel that's out there about the Rothschilds and these patents reverting to the Rothschilds. None of those people were actually on the plane, which is weird because it almost feels like that was pushed out there to like discredit conspiracy theorists that look into it because it's so easy to dismiss. You just go, well, we looked at those people are not on the plane. Boom, must be a conspiracy theory. But those 20 people are definitely the motive. That's way too many people for one plane. You know, I'm sure you've probably worked at companies as well where it's like you have a policy. It's like 2 or 3 people on one plane. 20 should have raised a bunch of red flags. Arwen from the MH370X investigative group actually found out where every single person was sitting. She looked up each one of the Freescale employees and ensured that they were like a real person. And we couldn't figure out exactly what all their jobs were, but they find out they're all sitting like next to each other as well in the plane. You're like, so these were not random tickets that were bought independently. Like the actual company most likely bought them all together. So you look at that, and to me, it brings up a motive right away of espionage being a possible play here. Like, was somebody preventing these people from getting to China? Were they potentially going to defect with this information, this technology? Um, and I think that with respect to the missing plane, it seems outlandish at first, but when you really start to dig into the rest of the evidence around it and how sophisticated the hijacking or abduction of the plane would have to be in 2014 for nobody to be blowing the whistle on it, you realize right away it's not, we're not talking about like jihadi terrorists with box cutters. This isn't a 9/11 scenario. Like this is a state sponsored event in order to pull this off.
Right. And now the cargo, because this is a very critical part of the story as well, and something that you've helped me understand. The lithium ion batteries. Where did they come from? Why were they on board? Were the pilots even aware of the cargo being on board?
And there's a lot of, it's like the fact that I can't even answer all of these questions and that the information is not readily available out there is even more suspicious. We know they were put together by Motorola, and Freescale Semiconductors broke off from Motorola in 2004. I'm not sure if that's a coincidence, but if so, it's a pretty weird one. There's 487 pounds of lithium ion batteries that missed 2 security screenings. There's a Straits Times article, speaking of Singapore, that's out there that mentions that there's 3 screenings. One of them, and they were just like hand inspected briefly, and that was it. There's a Russian GRU report that claims the United States government potentially put that cargo on board the plane. And there's a letter to Ashton Forbes that says that we made the batteries and we put them on the plane for this fire start. Now, lithium ion batteries in the last 10 years, we've gone from having like no understanding of the dangers of lithium ion batteries to like now we're watching people's like body parts get blown off. You know, the Hamas attack that was supposedly by Israel where they were able to put some kind of chemical into the batteries and they just caused them all to explode. So, and then there's been videos all over the place. The one scenario I bring up all the time is the South Korea incident that happened probably about a month ago, where I think 23 people died in a factory where lithium ion batteries are being produced. And there's actually video of it, video of the people, the workers trying to fight the fire. And you sit there and you wonder, like, why were they not able to get out? And the reason is because the smoke will knock you out within just 1 or 2 inhalations. There was even another flight, UPS Flight 6. I spoke to former FAA security director, Billy Vincent. I found him from looking at old articles, and he had already speculated a fire event. Made perfect sense for what happened to this plane. And that was even before we found out about the batteries. And he told me about UPS Flight 6, where it was just the pilot and the co-pilot on the plane. The pilot, before he could even get his hood on, fell unconscious. And then the co-pilot had to try to take over, and the co-pilot couldn't land the plane because the smoke was blocking the window and they couldn't see, and the plane ended up crashing. So the fire event related to the batteries is supported also by 20 witnesses, which should be like more than enough to cause people to look into it. But the way that it didn't happen is, first of all, they discredited any witness that said anything related to a fire. And they also, the Malaysian Airlines CEO lied and said there was no dangerous cargo on the plane until I believe it was March 20th. So almost 2 weeks after the plane had already disappeared. Then they come on to admit, oh, so just kidding, guys. There was this 487 pounds of dangerous lithium ion batteries. And we looked up that as well. Found out that there was 2 pallets of it in the forward cargo bay right next to the electronics bay. And in the case of UPS Flight 6, the fire burnt through the lining of the cargo bay. And this is what Billy Vincent had assumed had happened, because if that happens, you're going to have an electrical fire and it's going to make the plane go dark. So this is also, it was also speculated in a Wired article about MH370 that was like about the simplest solutions, or a startling simple solution to what happened to MH370, written just 2 days after the plane disappeared. So the question then becomes, was this an accidental fire? I mean, we've got Mike McKay that sees the plane on fire for a few seconds. The moment, the same location where the plane goes dark. We have a bunch of witnesses that hear either loud noises or see the plane flying low. Some of them claim to see the plane on fire. And then we've got Catherine T., who's in the Nicobar Islands after this plane's already turned around, flown over Malaysia, flown over Penang Airport, and is out in the Nicobar Islands, and she sees it in the middle of the night, flying low with no navigation lights, glowing orange with smoke coming out of the back of it. And then the last piece of corroborating evidence is that we have a China Times only Mayday call, and it was never reported in the Western media, but it's very specific. They say that they, I think it was the Taipei embassy in Thailand, maybe that's the wrong, I think that's right, intercepted communication from the U.S. Navy that was of the pilot in the plane, claiming that that plane was disintegrating and they were going to attempt an emergency landing or emergency ditching, essentially, in the ocean. So you've got those points of corroboration, and then you've got the videos. And then in the videos, when we watch them, we see, and in fact, maybe I'll just show the videos real quick while I'm just saying this so that people understand what we're talking about. These are the MH370 videos.
So just to clarify, if there's that fire going on, the one Mayday call, they got out before all the electricals were cut, and then they weren't able to broadcast any kind of radio communications after that point.
So there's a big question whether or not even radio communications would get knocked out. And people have brought that up. Like, even if the plane goes dark, like, is there really no radio communications? And I believe that there was, because 10 minutes after the plane went dark, there was another Boeing 777 pilot that was flying in Narita, and they heard communications from the plane. They didn't know if it was the pilot or co-pilot, but they heard static and they heard some communication. So I think the bigger question is, did they really not have communication? And the Malaysian Minister of Defense, I believe it was April, about 7 weeks after this plane disappears, does an interview. And he tells the interviewer that they knew the plane was not hostile, and that's why they didn't send up jets. So the question is, how would they know the plane's not hostile? Like, how would you know it's not a hijacking scenario? Because otherwise you should be sending up jets. This is a post 9/11 world. They might be trying to fly this plane to the Petronas Towers. And the only logical explanation I can come up with, the only one, is that they had communication. They knew the plane was not hostile because they had communication with the plane. They knew it was an emergency event. And people say, well, why don't we have any communications? Because they didn't release them. They didn't release them. And the big question would be, why did they wait so long to release the communications they did have, which was good night Malaysian Airlines Flight 370? In fact, because they waited so long there's even conspiracies around that where people think the plane did go back to Kuala Lumpur. And people are saying that they changed the wording of that last communication as well. So to me, I don't think we have any proof that we lost communications or there was no other communications. And what we have to stop doing is we have to stop just taking people at face value, especially when it comes to the officials and people who are making statements about this plane with no evidence to go along with it. I think that's how we've got stuck in this position, is that we blindly listen to the authority without just looking at the totality of the evidence. I mean, we're looking right now with our own eyes at a video of a Boeing 777 with smoke coming out of the back of it, flying very low because we can see these cumulus clouds in the background. The only reason why people do not believe this video is real is because we've got orbs flying around the plane here, and then it disappears. If this was a video of a plane crashing into the ocean, nobody would ever even begin to question it. not even begin to question it. They would say, absolutely, that's what happened to the plane. This is absolute proof that the plane crashed into the ocean, right? And that's just the state of our society today. So I'll flip over to the second one too, because the second one's very important, especially for the fire event. This is a completely
Yeah.
different angle of the same event.
One second there, Ashton.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just to make sure people are following along. If you're listening on audio, you can switch to YouTube because Ashton's got the videos up. And what you just showed there, the original video that you had playing, I mean, the plane is clearly making some kind of steep bank turn, right? That is not like a normal, like this isn't the normal route. There is something going on the plane, and the pilot is, doing some kind of correction, taking
It's a manual turn, right? And we know that too, because even from the official reports and the people who investigated the initial turn back, they knew it was not an autopilot turn. So presumably when the plane went dark, the pilot took manual control over this plane, and it's manually controlled ever since.
And you see these three balls like flying around the plane on the first video you showed. Now you're showing it with thermal imaging. But what's really important for people to understand, and what I just saw you post recently, same video out of Spain a year before, showing this exact same thing. And like, you what? So do you want to touch on that video first before we get into the disappearance?
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to point out real quick. So we're also looking at this thermal video. The reason why this is important for the fire is you can see this heat signature in the belly of the plane. And this is clearly not, it's not the engine on the other side. You can't see the engine on the other side. The heat signature is as hot as the engine is. And you can clearly see in the frame that I'm showing here that the smoke is not coming from the engine. You can see there's a clear line from this heat signature in the belly of the plane to this smoke that's coming out of it. So it's coming from the hull of the plane and is wrapping around the hull of the plane and is creating two jets of smoke, which is why people are getting confused and thinking that it's contrails or that the smoke just must be coming from the engines when it's clearly not in this image here. So we've even got, go ahead.
Is that where the lithium ion batteries were placed, in that compartment, or you're not entirely sure?
I spoke to several people that are familiar with the engineering capabilities and engineering of this Boeing 777. And the one that was the most compelling to me was somebody who had testified on Capitol Hill related to airline safety. And they said that if the batteries were in the forward cargo bay, that what would happen is the smoke would go through the air conditioning system and circulate out through the airplane. And that it could, and then the big kicker I found was that there's two AC heat exhaust ports right next to the landing gear. So you have these little vents. So that's presumably where the smoke is coming out of. Now, we can't be 100% sure. You could also, there could be other explanations too, like maybe there's some structural integrity with the plane, etc. But that seems the most likely based on just what we're seeing with our eyes. And again, I think a lot of this comes down to we need to just stop dismissing what we see with our eyes. First thing we should do is, what are we seeing with our eyes? And then let's try to explain that. A lot of people in this world, they have this worldview in their head, and they think that I need to reconcile what my worldview in my head is, and then I'm going to, claim that what I'm seeing with my eyes can't be real anymore. And that's why we get to people who really struggle to accept that these videos can possibly be real, even though, even just the evidence that I've already said. Can you still hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Yep.
Okay, sorry. My screen just I just crashed here, but as long as you can hear me and see me, it's fine. So yeah, we just we have to follow what the evidence says, regardless of whether or not our preconceived notions are regarding this. And then the other thing too, like if you are a UFO person, which I wasn't really a UFO person before this, I've had to try to catch up on all the lore and who the main players are and stuff like that. You've seen these orbs of light pretty often over the last 10 years. And that Madrid video, which I posted earlier today on Twitter, is a good example of that, where you see these orbs in a perfect triangle formation, and it just looks like balls of light. And they're flying around what looks like a commercial airliner. Now, in that case, they don't teleport it away or make it disappear off the face of the earth. But it goes to show that this is not a phenomenon that is unique or brand new. This is something that's been out there. And there's many other videos that are similar, maybe not as compelling as that. but that show this same kind of event. So then the question will be, what are these orbs? What is this? Are we looking at aliens here? A lot of people immediately just think, oh, if I don't recognize that, it must be otherworldly. It must be aliens. But I'm here to challenge that preconception for sure.
Let's get into that.
Okay.
What are the orbs? What are we seeing? What do you believe they are?
Yes, so I believe that's United States government technology. And when I say United States government, it's kind of an overarching umbrella because it includes the private military contractors as well, who we outsource a huge amount of our defense research and development to. The US Pentagon cannot pass a budget audit, and presumably this is part of the reason why. Now, I've done probably one of the deepest dives anybody has ever done on this technology and on the science related to this. And the underlying principle for it is quantum mechanics and zero point energy. And what we're looking at with those orbs, I call them superconductive harmonic orbs. And this is what I called them a year ago when I first started digging into them. Because when you look at the video, you can tell that it doesn't look like a solid like metal object. It looks like a field around something. And the first thing you think of is like a magnetic field. So these orbs are balls of coherent self-sustaining plasma. And the plasma here is essentially like a fusion reactor, a miniature fusion reactor. It's either called cold fusion or low energy nuclear reactions is the new politically correct term for it, supposedly, because people don't like cold fusion. And we see this heat signature in there that is looks like a Tesla sign. They call it the Ukana if you're into like ancient history. And this idea that, maybe we've had this technology and we've forgotten it over the course of our civilization. And that Ukana that Tesla symbol, is a vortex that's happening there. Now, just yesterday, I was looking into Paul Sis, who is or was he's passed away now. He had worked in McDonnell Douglas.
All right, so we had a quick crash out, but it's good. Hopefully, that's cleared the bug because then you can share your screen again and show some of the pictures. But
Yep.
we were basically talking about the orbs
Yep.
and trying to figure out what they are, where have they come from, and
Yeah.
the leaked video. So this is what's interesting. I'd parked this story because you know. There's only so much brain power you can put to something, and there's so many lies you can bear to read before you just like, I just need to move away from this. But when you resurfaced with these videos from the drone, where did they come from? Who was the whistleblower? How were they leaked? So you can get the listeners up to speed, and then you
Yeah.
can talk us through the video and what we're looking at the same time. Because it's not like
Yeah.
somebody just mocked these things up just to, let's get this story going again, guys. This seems like a fun one. Like, let's stir this pot. This is real footage.
Yeah, the first video, and this is too probably the strongest proof the videos are real is really the first video and the time frame. These videos are from 2014. They're not like they came out 10 years later. The window of opportunity here is extremely narrow. It's between 4 days and 72 days. I mean, and unless you think that the person who first uploaded them was lying in their description where they say received March 12th, 2014, just 4 days after the plane disappeared, unless you think that person is lying, then the videos are automatically real because we were looking in the South China Sea still for 4 or 5 days. It wasn't until March 13th that US intelligence sources leaked to the media that they think the plane went into the South Indian Ocean. That's literally how it ended up happening. Literally, US intelligence, unnamed people said it went to the South Indian Ocean. Before that, we didn't know what was going on. The world had no clue. And these videos, the one I'm going to show right now, which is the satellite video once again, it has coordinates in the bottom left. These coordinates in the bottom left are the Nicobar Islands, where Catherine T was, within 100 miles of where Catherine T was confirmed to be located. It says NROL 22. If you Google that, you'll find the Wikipedia page. This was the first launch of the space-based infrared system in 2006. Now, the real kicker is this video was published, which presumably is the first time this video was published and uploaded on the internet by Regicide Anon, the uploader, May 19th, 2014. So now we've got this 70-day window, and you wonder, why did it take them so long to upload it? Well, they probably had a hard time believing it, just like anybody has a hard time believing it even right now. But that data is so vital because the raw Inmarsat telemetry data, which is how we determined the path of this plane, was not available till May 27th. So we have U.S. intelligence sources say that the plane went into the South Indian Ocean on March 13th, but it's not until May 27th that the data gets released to the public. Before that, all there was this weird graph that nobody had any idea what it even meant. So how would somebody have known to put this plane in the Nicobar Islands with these coordinates, real coordinates we see down their bottom left? These are not just random numbers spinning up and down. Like, this is real coordinates that are moving when this view changes. There's no way they could know that. So either somebody guessed, made a hoax video for some reason, some twisted reason, of real MH370, and they guessed the right location of the plane. They guessed that, yep, this plane flew to the Nicobar Islands, and then it made a sharp turn and went to the South Indian Ocean right there. Or these videos are what really happened in the plane. And it shouldn't be that surprising that these videos are what happened in the plane, because it's 10 years later. We never found the plane. They searched in the South Indian Ocean for 3 years and found nothing there. Not one piece of the plane in the South Indian Ocean. No black boxes, nothing. The official investigation ends 3 years later, and their official investigation says, we don't know what happened. What? How can you have a 3-year investigation searching the South Indian Ocean and come out and just say, we have no idea? We don't know what happened. Like, you know. So the second video, this video gets leaked 2 weeks after the first video. It says June 5th, 2014 was when it was received, published June 12th, 2014. So now you're starting to develop a time frame for what was going on here. Somebody leaked the first video. It's got coordinates in it. It's got satellite designations in there. It's the real location of the plane. I mean, that should have been absolute proof that the videos are real. And then they're like, well, here's a second video from a completely different angle with a different asset. This is filmed by a Predator drone, a UAV. We've identified as an MQ-1C Gray Eagle with cameras underneath the wings, which are custom loadout slots, but it could also be an MQ-9. They look identical. So you can see the nose of the drone right there as well. Somebody else also pointed out, it's possible that this is cropped. You're the first person who's heard this so far. I've had 2 people tell me, do you think the drone's cropped and they've cropped out the HUD data? And the more I look at it, the more I think yes, because it should be wider. It should be wider on the sides. And that's where the HUD data potentially would be. It might even be along the top as well. And I had never really realized that. And I want to look into it some more, because that would also be pretty damning. Like, who makes a hoax video where they're cropping out the HUD data? You know, this goes to show you that there's some intent here where this is not a Chinese spy or something that leaked this, because if they did, they're not going to go to all this effort to crop out this data. And the drone is not visible in the satellite video, meaning they cropped it out as well. It was carefully cropped, and it was a much bigger field of view. People say, well, how do you know that? Because we can see the mouse come from the top right of the screen and then go off on the bottom left of the screen. So we know what we're looking at is much bigger than what it appears in the video. The drone video, the question is like, why are you filming this? Like, this is incriminating. Why are you filming this? And it's the U.S. government filming this. That's a U.S. government General Atomics drone that we're looking at right here. You can even see the heat signature of where the computer of the drone is. How would anyone in the public even know what to make this look like, especially with the thermal gradient on top of it? Here's the kicker. This is why it's not aliens, guys, for people who are out there. The camera operator here knows what's about to go down. They're filming it before those orbs even show up. And they are zooming in on the plane before we can even see the orbs in this video. Like here, they're already starting to zoom in on the plane, and there's the first orb coming along it. And then you can see the second orb come along. To me, this is very clear that they're filming this for intelligence purposes, because you're going to give this back to the engineers. and you're going to say, here was how it worked out. Like, can you make this better, or get whatever scientific data you can get off of this? And then we see them zoom in here. And now they have this perfect view of the plane where you can even see the orbs, and it's perfect. Honestly, if this wasn't a horrific incident, I would say this is beautiful to watch, especially with these orbs spinning around the plane like this. They go through the smoke trail as well. In one of these videos I have, you can see them accurately displace the smoke trail. But the operator knew that that was about to happen, go down. They zoom out. Look at them zoom out right here. So we're zoomed in on the plane. They zoom out. Then the orbs converge. And then you see this endothermic event, this cold black event. Took me a while to figure out what we were looking at here. I could not understand. Just plane got annihilated, got sent to another dimension. That's a real wormhole. Because when we go to 0 point energy in this sea of energy, what a wormhole essentially is that you're pulling all the energy out of a region. And when you pull all the energy out of a region, you're creating a singularity, like a black hole. The only difference is that a black hole has an event horizon, meaning that if you go past the event horizon, there's no escape. With this type of wormhole event, there is no event horizon, which means that it's humanly traversable. It means that if you go through it, you just show up somewhere else. So what's happening here is you're manipulating the medium of space-time itself. We're not taking the plane and pushing the plane at super speed. We're just taking the area around it, picking it up, putting it around somewhere else. But it's not even that simple, because you're not actually just pulling all of the area and moving the whole area somewhere else either. It gets very weird when you start dealing with the quantum mechanics of it, especially when it's like Schrodinger's cat type of situation, like, is the cat alive or is that cat dead when you open it up? So to me, it's pretty clear from looking at this, this must be an operation. This must be a planned operation. This is why the drone is there filming. This is why they're filming before the orbs even show up. And this implies that those orbs are United States government technology. They're not flying saucers. They're not aliens or anything that you see inside of that. Lastly, one of the most compelling reasons why this footage is real, legit footage, not just the fact that we're looking at real clouds in the background. These are not CGI clouds or VFX clouds. These are real clouds. They match in both videos. Is the shake of the camera. The camera shake increases accurately as they zoom in, the same way where if you were to use your camera and you zoom in on something, it's going to start to shake a little bit. This is not an effect that somebody overlaid over something and had it just randomly move around. This is actually an operator zooming in and manually tracking the plane and trying to keep it in view, where you can tell they struggle because it falls out of view a couple times as well. And that's most likely because of the lag. So when the camera operators are using these drones, they are, in Texas or something like that. And this is the Nicobar Islands, or they could be anywhere. So there's going to be a lag time when they're operating the camera. Some people that use these drones have told me that it's like can be up to like 1 second. So technically, there was somebody who replied to me that said they had some information about, like, they showed this to somebody that operates these drones, and their response was, "Damn, that camera operator is pretty good." And I was like, and just for the people that are skeptical, I've had dozens of people that I don't report on them or post the posts, but they'll send me stuff like, I work in either intel or drones like this, and like, keep going, or you're on over the top of it, or stuff like that. I've had, I think, 2 or 3 different people say that they either have worked with General Atomics drones, or they have a friend that worked with General Atomics, and that's exactly what it would look like as well. So these are just some of the reasons why people ask, like, why are you so into this? Why are you so trying to push this? And it's that, like, this is the biggest story ever. This is just the biggest story ever. We're talking about free energy for people. The government stole a commercial airliner, and we're covering it up because of that technology that you see there. So just to wrap it back around, if this was people ask, if this was a fire event, what's the deal with the orbs? And the answer is, if this was just a fire event, there's no reason to cover it up. Just let the plane crash. We find a crash plane, whatever. The reason why you cover it up is because then you see the videos, and the videos show the fire event. And then you go, yeah, we can't explain this. We can't show this, especially because that's the United States super weapon. That weapon that we see there with those orbs, those superconductive harmonic orbs, That's more powerful than a nuke. That is pure supremacy over the entire planet. Somebody shoots a nuke at you, I send my orbs on it, now the nuke goes back on top of you. You know, that type of technology. And it gets more dangerous than that, frankly. So go ahead.
Oh man, yeah, so much to unpack. Uh, where to go?
How much
Plasma.
did you
But
hear about my explanation about the history of the orbs? Because I went for like 5 minutes, I think, and I don't think I got cut off.
right, the history of the orbs. Yeah, no, go again in
Okay.
case
I'll
you
just do
got
a
cut
quick
off.
recap. So I was watching Paul Sizz, and he was a former engineer that had worked on like black projects and aerospace. And he explains how we use these plasma sheaths to make our planes go much faster and be able to break through essentially the limit of what friction would allow us to do. And then I said, well, clearly what happened is at some point someone realized, why have a plane at all? We just need to have a orb with just the plasma, and then the plasma itself can cohere energy straight out of the ether or straight out of this 0 point energy field that's there. And this also has a side effect of, when you do this, it actually reduces your mass and allows you to float freely as well, because when you remove the 0 point energy, that's what's causing inertia. So when you remove that, that's why it removes the drag as well. So you remove the 0 point energy, and then at some point we said, okay, well, we've now got this self-cohering, self-organizing ball of plasma that we can move around, probably with AI, probably with radars, probably several ways to manage it and have it just float around however you want. But because the movements are so specific with the orbs, I think that we use like probably quantum computers or some kind of military AI to manage the movement of those orbs. And that would probably be also why this technology would have really started to take off in the 2000s, when we started getting quantum computers and things, and these supercomputers that are like much, much, much more powerful than conventional computers. And then somebody at some point realized, well, let's take three of these orbs that are very powerfully electrically charged, and jam them together in a 0 point arrangement so that the forces perfectly cancel out. You know, with you can a 0 point alignment can be like 2 points that are jammed together, like two magnets, but it can also be a triangle as well, where all three of them are jamming together. And that when we do that, just like with a magnet, you create a very, very powerful repulsive force. But we're going to scale that up even higher because we can pull energy straight out of the vacuum. And then this is what allows us to break through the Schwinger limit, which is about 10 to the 33. I think it's joules per meter cubed or something like that. Don't, maybe fact check me on that. But the Schwinger limit then causes space-time to become nonlinear. The way I look at that is where it's like you see this rip in space-time. And then it's almost like if you're pulling water out of the ocean or out of a lake or whatever, that the water is immediately going to fill up the gap immediately. It's going to, not neutralize, but it's gonna, whatever gap where you pulled that water out, the water's gonna rush in and fill it. Same way with space-time itself. So you're keeping this wormhole open for a brief second, and then it's immediately just the energy levels are closing it up again immediately after it, right behind it. And we can see how fast it happens when we watch the video. It happens in about 0.1 or 0.2 seconds out there. So somebody figured that out, and then they realized, oh boy, we've got the ultimate weapon. Like, this is something that we can never talk about. And this is why, we're hiding this from people. But to really take it to the next level, at some point during this investigation, probably 4 months ago or so, I looked at this and I was looking at it and I just go, the real kicker here isn't just even teleportation. It's free energy. It's that these balls of plasma are just pulling unlimited energy out of the ether, out of the ocean of energy that's out there. And then you can immediately start to see that, well, why can't we just make like a black hole out of this? Why couldn't we make a big bang out of this? Where's the limit even? The limit's basically just your imagination. And then you realize, wow, well, this is a super weapon. This is beyond just teleportation. This is a doomsday weapon. We can turn this into a black hole super weapon that could wipe out not just even our planet, our entire solar system, maybe the entire galaxy, maybe the entire universe. And the part that's scary for the government is it's the type of weapon that somebody might be able to produce in their garage, like with the right equipment. It's not the type of thing where we're going to be able to regulate it as easily as we regulate people who are trying to get plutonium or what have you with nuclear weapons. I'm sure there probably are some ways to regulate it. But imagine if a lone terrorist who is, a suicide bomber or whatever has access to this. And it was Paul Sis actually in one of the interviews with him where he brought this up. He said that like this is the real threat. And this is why we had to hide it. We had to hide it. I don't even blame the government for hiding it, because when you come to that conclusion, you realize we can't just have the free energy or just have the teleportation capability, because once you find out about any of it, it's a Pandora's box. Everything is coming with it. And unfortunately, that means weapons of mass destruction far, far beyond what the public even is aware of. People are freaking out about nuclear war. I just laugh. That's like little firecrackers. You're afraid of little firecrackers. I'm talking about poof, the planet doesn't exist anymore. And it's not like it requires this thousands of people to be able to do it. It just requires like one person to push a button and that's it. So this is what's so scary and dangerous about the situation. And you can see why nothing is black and white in this world. So a lot of people will say, well, this is a war crime to do this to a commercial airliner filled with innocent civilians. I mean, it's 239 people's lives on the line here. But when you look at it from the bigger picture, you can see how they would easily be able to justify it. And even I struggle with the concept where it's like, if you're trying to prevent China from getting this technology, because any two people that have this technology and two warring factions, that's probably game over for our entire civilization. And then you can see why they would also stifle the scientific progress, because if you figure out any one aspect of this, if people start really digging into 0 point energy and realizing it's legit, it's there, it can't be denied, they're going to pull that thread and they're going to get to the logical conclusion, which is black hole super weapons. So you have to run a very advanced, what they call psychological operation that gets people to believe that it's not possible. You can't produce free energy. You can't make a perpetual motion machine. It can't be possible. It violates the laws of thermodynamics. And the people that say that don't even know what the laws of thermodynamics are. So this is how they keep it secret from us. And people say, well, why don't people blow the whistle? They do. They do sometimes. How do you think I found out about all of this? Like, I've been watching the videos of the engineers who worked in the black projects explaining that it's real, like Paul Sis, and he just says it and explains it all, lays it out why they hide it, and everything. And the world just ignores it. And I think it goes to show that our civilization is not nearly as advanced, not nearly as intelligent as we pretend we are. We are just monkeys, cavemen in suits, playing dress up, So I'll
Another
let you
couple of
jump in. I kind
names.
of ranted. Yeah.
Another couple of names that you've mentioned that I've seen you watch videos of and comment on, or even interview Salvatore Paez, Sal Paez, the Romanian scientist, and Hal Pudov, to back up what Paul Sears was saying as well. Names I never thought I'd ever have heard of, but what is, a lot of people are listening to this, and there's a lot of words being thrown around, and so you're right. People talk about the laws of thermodynamics like they actually know what they're talking about. I don't know the laws of thermodynamics. I've had another Bitcoiner come on and tell me there's even a 0th law of thermodynamics, right? So there's, and you also have to remember, and I'm sorry if I'm going to trigger the PhD physicists out there, but you're only a PhD in the physics that they want you to know. And yes, who are they in the question marks? But we don't all know, but a certain general education board captured the education system many years ago and was funded very generously by John D. Rockefeller and the Rockefeller Foundation. And this name comes up in every corner of every conspiracy theory, or is the leading name in most. You are only spouting what you've been. Yeah, and by the way, they own the certification process. So you're only going to get a PhD if you actually tick the boxes in which they want you to be, exploring. They don't want someone like you snooping around and actually trying to educate people, which you do on your YouTube channel, about thermodynamics and quantum physics and everything else that you've been pointing out, and 0 point energy. So what is what actually is plasma for us that have not gone down this rabbit hole and we're just throwing this word around like willy-nilly. What is
Mm.
plasma, and how does it work, and how would it create that split second interruption in space-time where a plane just disappears?
Yeah. So I guess the real question, and I think where a lot of another way where science goes wrong, or that it struggles, is that you actually have to be an electrical engineer and a physicist in order to understand this. Part of it's because the universe is electric, and 0 point energy, when you really boil it down to, comes down to charges, electrical charges, and asymmetries. So the big thing that you really need to know right away is, what is energy? Where's energy even coming from? Where's the energy for this light right here coming from right now? A lot of people have this understanding. They're like, well, we're burning the coal, and then the energy from the burning is going into the lights. No, all power plants do is spin a generator. That's all they're doing. And they're finding a way to do that. Nuclear power, for example, we heat up some water and we have it make steam, and then the steam spins the generator, spins a turbine. Like, does that seem efficient to anybody out there? People have this idea that, oh, we're splitting the atom and then the energy's sucked out into the lights or whatever. Like, no, that would be very efficient if we did that. But no, that's not at all how it works. Imagine a battery or a capacitor. All it really is you have more negative charges and more electrons on one side than you have on the other. You have an asymmetry. If battery is dead, then it's been neutralized. You've got the neutralization of the charges. There's no more excess electrons or negative charge on one side than the other. So at the end of the day, if you plug this battery into a circuit, it's going to flow. You're going to have electron flow, and the electron flow creates electric fields based on the right-hand rule that dictates the direction of the power travel, which is why Vertasium made this video. He's an electrical engineer on YouTube, that shows that if you flip a switch and you have a light right next to you, that light is going to turn on at the speed of light related to the distance between the switch or the battery and the light. Even if your electric circuit goes all the way around the world, the energy is not flowing through the wires. The fields are going through the wires, and the fields are causing the direction of travel of the power, which is directly from your battery to your light. And there's a lot of electrical engineers that this blew their minds. They thought, this can't be real. You're cheating. This is not how the real world works, because they've been taught incorrectly. They were taught incorrectly in their PhD courses. They were taught incorrectly in all this school. And so then what gets the power to flow? The asymmetry is what gets the power to flow. When we're spinning the generator, all we're doing is we're creating more electrical charges on one side than the other, causing the asymmetry. So at the end of the day, what's the problem? What do we have to solve? We have to create an asymmetry in our charges. And if we do that, we're going to have power flowing. It was Thomas Bearden that said, quite famously now, in my opinion, that all the coal, all the oil, all the nuclear power, all the solar, all the wind never added 1 watt of power to the power line. All we need to do is have an asymmetry, and we need to keep our dipole, which is our asymmetry of positive and negative charges. We just need to keep it open. So instead of having it constantly fall apart and trying to reopen it, just keep it open, keep it stuck open. Like put a wedge in the door to keep the door open, essentially. And the way, if you dig into Tesla and some of these others, you do this is through resonance and through pulsed current, which is equivalent to pushing a swing. So instead of just pushing the swing the whole time, which is silly, you would never do that. It's inefficient. Just push the swing when it comes back. In fact, if you look into parametric resonance, an electrical system and electrical oscillations, you'll find that if you do that, it's not even that the swing goes back to where it was before. It actually starts to do this. And then you look at it and you go, whoa, how is that possible? And Tesla had figured this out 100 years ago, is that we can actually amplify energy. So why is plasma important? To go back to the original question. Well, plasma is the fourth state of matter. In a plasma, the electrons break free, and they start to do something very odd. Normally, the electrons should repel one another. But when you get to a plasma, especially a superconductive plasma, the electrons begin to attract to one another and form charge clusters. of electrons, of a negative charge. Now, why is that important? Because if I have a charge of negative electrons here, and there's more here than there is over here, I've created a dipole. I've created an asymmetry. So what's happening in the plasma? The plasma is basically acting as a never-ending battery due to its natural properties of plasma itself. And how do we do that? We have more current flow through one area, or an electrical charge flow through one area of the plasma than another. And when we do that, what do we see? The Okonavasara. We see that vortex begin to form. And because of its natural properties, it's self-sustaining. It's cohering enough energy that it can just perpetually produce more and more and more. This is why the tokamak reactors use plasma fusion reactors, and this is how they're able to get coefficient of performance greater than 1, which is free energy. That's what free energy is coefficient of performance greater than 1. Now, with respect to laws of thermodynamics, I've already challenged every single PhD, every physicist, every MH370 investigator, really anybody who wants to challenge that. Nobody is brave enough to take the challenge. I even challenged electrical engineers to review free energy devices that have coefficient of performance greater than 1, that have meters that will show it. And you realize there's this block. They're literally too afraid to admit that they've been lied to their whole lives. The two laws of thermodynamics that come into play here are the first and second law. First law of thermodynamics, energy is not created or destroyed. Yeah, that's true. But all you have to do is realize that there's not zero energy out there. The 0-point energy is a sea of practically unlimited energy. And all we're doing is we're dipping into it. In fact, this is what negative energy is. When we're dipping into that energy, that's a negative. We're going below the 0 on the axis. And we know this is possible. How do we know it's possible? Because there's something called superfluid, superfluid helium-3 or superfluid lithium-6. Even when we cool it to absolute 0, it's still in liquid form. If there was no energy out there, that would not be possible. It would go into a solid because there's not enough energy. But because what's really happening is that even at absolute 0 temperature, there is still the 0-point fluctuations that are causing it to stay in a liquid form. And this proves beyond any shadow of a doubt that there is energy out there in the 0-point energy field, enough to keep helium in a liquid form even at absolute 0. So the first law of thermodynamics is not a problem. All energy is coming from the ether, all of it, even the light's right here. That's where the energy is coming from all the time. So we're not creating energy out of nothing. And then for the people that are still have a struggle with it, I would just say, where do you think all the energy, all the mass and all the energy in the universe came from? Where do you think the energy from the Big Bang came from? They would just go, it came from nothing. And you go, well, there you go. You violated your own principles. You think that something can't come from nothing, right? The second law of thermodynamics is a bit more complicated. Fundamentally boils down to, in a closed system, you cannot be perfectly efficient because you're always losing some heat due to inefficiency, entropy. Your system's going to heat up even a little bit, and that means you can never be perfectly efficient. Now, the way around this system is that you open your system up. We don't need a closed system. Just open your system up. In fact, we do this all the time already with wind power. A wind turbine itself, without wind, can never produce energy, right? It doesn't actually do anything. So what do? We add wind input into it. Solar power, same thing. We add solar into it. And yes, we can still lose energy, but we're going to get energy out of it still. Now, why 0-point energy is better than that is that when it comes to 0-point energy, we don't rely on the wind. We don't rely on the sun to be shining. And we have an unlimited amount. We're not rate limited by how much the wind is blowing. The wind's only blowing 20 miles an hour, so we're going to get X amount of energy out. Or the sun is only giving us this much energy, so therefore we can't get more than what it's giving us. With 0-point energy, it's practically unlimited C. The only issue is how much we want to set our rate, so we can decide how much we want to pull out at any given point in time. And there's so much that there practically isn't a limit until you get to the point where you pull so much out that you create a wormhole, or a singularity, if you want to think of it like that. So the interesting thing about free energy then, when you look at it like this, is that it's not actually violating the first or second law. The second law of thermodynamics is saying we can pull in this excess energy from the 0-point fluctuations, and this is our extra input. We can have an initial input. Like if we have to, let's say, take a magnetic motor. and we have to get it started before it starts to produce that excess energy. We can have an input that's allowed in a free energy device. The only thing that matters is that we have to be getting more out at the end of the day than what we're getting in. In fact, we can also lose energy due to entropy. That's also fine. So we're putting a little bit of energy in. The ether is sending us energy in 0 point fluctuations. That's coming in as well. And then we're losing a little bit due to inefficiency. And then we're getting out this amount over here. And as I said, with resonance, with the swing example, we apply the swing example in the pulse current. And now this allows it to have a situation where we're getting out coefficient of performance more than 1, which is more energy than we locally put into it over here on this other side. And so that's how people initially got mad at me when I started pushing free energy. And I said, well, this is the logical answer, is once you realize it's all about 0 point energy and look at the physics like this, you cannot break these concepts apart. Gravity manipulation, inertia, and 0 point energy and free energy are all connected by the exact same physics. This also goes back then to finish this thought of what I was telling you with respect to Pandora's box. Once you open this up, you're getting it all. People ask, well, why would you hide gravity manipulation? Why would you? Because it's all coming out once you figure that out. And I'm not going to dig much into the medical aspects of it, but this goes much more even beyond than just gravity manipulation. Like when you're manipulating gravity, you're manipulating space-time, and space and time are one and the same. And Paul Sis says that basically at the quantum level, what you're really doing is you're manipulating time, and that maybe distance, aka space, is just an illusion, and really you're manipulating time itself. And if you can do that, imagine if you would reverse the time on the cells in your body, or on a disease, or on a tumor in your body, and it reverts back to a previous state. You can see that the implications for what this technology can do are almost unlimited.
This is so interesting that you've tied this into the ether, because the Stolen series that I've been doing has been around the work of Wilhelm Reich and the ether and orgone energy. And what you know, Tesla, you mentioned Tesla again. He's popped up in the past episodes as well. Who silenced him?
Yeah, J.P. Morgan, famously J.P.
Shock.
Morgan, and I think it was also Benjamin Franklin as well, right? Or no, Thomas Edison. And they couldn't put a meter. They couldn't put a meter on free energy. If you can just pull energy out, well, we don't need to burn oil anymore. Not gonna make any money off of it. And it seems like we just forgot. Back when I grew up,
So that
I thought
connects
the Tesla was like this.
Rockefeller as well, because he was the oil and the
Rockefeller.
coal guy. And,
Yeah, all the guys that were into coal and oil and power, right? They monopolized the situation. In fact, I mean, I think we've been doing it. There's a lot of people that created free energy devices. John Searle, John Bendini, John Hutchinson, Thomas Bearden, even Stanley Meyer with his hydrogen-powered car. He actually created technically a free energy device that was also over Unity as well. And they were all based on the same physics. And they all met untimely fates for the most part. Not all of them.
Same as Reich. Reich died suddenly a day before he was going to be released from prison.
Yeah, and so when you look into the history of it too, and like to speak real quickly about the engineers, like Hal Puthoff seems to be like the godfather of this. It all goes back to him every single time I look. There are these papers called the DIRS, the Defense Intelligence Research Documents. These were the mother lode when I found them. It's very, very clear when you read them that whoever organized those knows about advanced technology that the public is not ready to accept at the moment. There's papers on wormholes, warp drives, plasma, magnetohydrodynamics, which I was talking about earlier. Paul Sis wrote one of them. There's high frequency gravitational waves by Robert M.L. Baker, another legend. And the person who organized those is Hal Puthoff. Hal Puthoff also has the scientific paper, Gravity as a 0 point fluctuation force. He has another paper with Heish about 0 point fluctuations explain inertia. He's got another paper with Cole explaining how pulling energy out of the vacuum doesn't violate the laws of thermodynamics, as I've also explained. And you just look at this and you go, this guy, if there are UFOs, alien UFOs that are out there, this guy has seen them, like beyond any shadow of a doubt. All his papers are just, he's hitting the bullseye over and over and over again. What's up with this guy? And you find out, oh, he's been connected to black projects for 50 years. He knows everybody in the business, Um, to me, even if he was gatekeeping, I still just have tremendous respect for him because I've read all his papers and I know beyond any shadow of a doubt that he knows what's going on with this stuff in zero point energy. And I think Salvatore Paez came to a similar conclusion. The way I found all this was my first interview with Salvatore Paez. I was researching the plane and the orbs, and people were like, "You should reach out to this guy Salvatore Paez. He has these patents like inertial mass reduction for a transmedium craft and piezoelectric induced superconductivity and high frequency gravitational wave generator." And I'm going, well, that's weird because I think that these are superconductive harmonic orbs. Oh, and he also has magnetically confined fusion reaction. And I'm going, okay, well, so I email him. Within just a few hours, he emails back, says, set up a podcast and we'll talk. And I didn't have a podcast. So I started talking to him. And this was before I knew anything about electrical engineering. I could have never have had this conversation a year ago. And I just took notes on every single thing he said. If you watch that interview, it's Hard Truths #1 with Salvatore Paez. I mean, everything he says goes over my head. He's name dropping, Maxwell, all these physicists and engineers and these concepts. I didn't understand any of it, and I still probably have the notepad where I just listed down all these things that he was saying. And over the last 9 months, 10 months, I've basically spent every waking day hour outside of my job researching them, and you guys can too. It is possible for you. You don't have to have a PhD. You can just be a normal person. If you put the time and effort into it, it won't be quick, but you can figure it out. You start at the beginning with the basic concepts until you understand those and work your way up. And yesterday I made a post because I started thinking about it and how weird that interaction with Salvatore Paez was. Most people, when I hit up PhDs and engineers, they're reluctant to talk to me or reluctant to talk. Salvatore Pais was excited. And when I would do the interview with him, like he was praising me and all this stuff. And I just couldn't, it was so bizarre. I didn't know what was going on. I almost felt like he had talked to me from the future or something like that. Or it's like, do you know something about me that I don't know? Right. And I was thinking about last night after I watched the Paul Size thing about the history of the plasma research. And I went, holy shit, Salvatore Paez made the orbs. He made the effing orbs. Like he made those orbs. That makes the thing makes perfect sense. Like this guy's been an active Navy engineer for I don't know how long. He's in his 50s, so it's got to be at least a decade, if not longer. As far as I know, he's worked on black projects as well. Why was he excited to talk to me? Because I'm looking at his work and I'm sitting there going, and I'm nailing it going, these are plasma orbs of superconductivity. And that's what all of his patents are. You add up his patents, the confined fusion reaction, that's the plasma orb. The gravity, high frequency gravitational wave generator, that's these dark lines we see in front of the orbs in the videos. They're just falling forward into there. The piezoelectric superconductivity. In the interview, he said that we can just induce superconductivity. We don't need a metamaterial to do it. You can induce it with like a resonance, essentially. And he's talking about that in the plasma as well. And when you do that, you get no resistance. And then you go back to the parametric oscillations, and this just causes the amplification of the energy to just skyrocket. And so I'm going, holy crap, I think he made the orbs. And what's crazy, he never said anything like that to me at all. In any of our interactions, they're mostly mundane other than the interview. But that's the only thing that really makes sense to me. He's just super excited because he's seeing somebody who's explaining it. And this is why he got gagged, presumably, after our interviews. And why in follow-up stuff, like he wouldn't really talk too much about any of the science related stuff as well, because it's probably dangerous for him. Like he's not allowed to talk about those orbs for sure. Especially because if it's a weapon, like he would be breaking his NDA. He could go to prison probably for discussing it. So I'm grateful for Salvatore Paez. If you guys are not familiar, you absolutely need to check out his patents that are out there. They got approved in like 2017 or 2018. The Navy had to step in because the patent officers didn't think that they were physically possible. And the Navy was like, yeah, no, they are. You need to approve these. And they did. So
Oh, man. Can we keep going or do you have to jump?
we can go for a little bit longer.
Okay. Because I want to bring it back to the plane and the passengers on board. Like you said, this is 239 people. Goodness knows how many connections that has, ripple effects on the different families that have suffered, over the years. And I feel especially bad for the pilots, because one of the theories was pinned on the pilots being suicidal and all of this kind of complete nonsense. Whereas what they were doing were trying to rescue the other 237 souls on that plane. So I find that particularly sick and vile and disgusting, that story, that, yeah, one of the stories went along the lines of they flew so high that the oxygen masks dropped down, and then everybody fell asleep, and then it just slowly descended into the deepest canyon in an ocean known to man. And like, it just absolute complete, people, honestly, like, if you believe that, just switch off now, because you really need to. And these are the people that are going to point at you and I and call us a conspiracy theorist and
That's the ultimate
say,
irony, though, right? Is that like the people
yeah,
that come up with the craziest conspiracy theory, like what the government's covering up that it was a suicidal pilot, they're like, yeah, they covered it up because they don't want the shame. Like, what? They want no shame? Or they say like he's an Islamic terrorist, which is just racist. Or they say like he flew over. Like you look at the flight path, and for the record, they've looked at the radar pings, and he didn't he increased altitude, but it wasn't like to knock people out. He looks like what he was trying to do is squawk, which is like let people know that something is wrong. And then he actually descends, which is not what you would do if you were trying to knock everybody out. That's what you do when you're trying to give people enough oxygen. He flies directly at Penang, which is the closest airport to land. It's like clearly based on the flight, that's an emergency scenario. And these people are like, oh, well, he was saying goodbye to his hometown. What? It's 1 a.m. It's pitch black, saying goodbye to his hometown. And then he's like taking this roundabout route to go around Indonesia. And how do they justify that? They go, well, he's evading radar. That's not how radar works. Like he was in range of all these radars. If you're a suicidal
777.
pilot, you just fly right over Indonesia. And then this new one, this guy from Australia, I can't remember, something Lane or something like that. He's like, oh, he like studied ocean topography to figure out what the exact hole is that he should try to perfectly land the plane in the ocean without it breaking apart and have it sink into the little hole in the ocean. This is insane. This is more insane than thinking Orbs took the plane, So yeah, the people that are going to try to come out and say, oh, you believe in conspiracy. I say, dude, if you think this was a suicidal pilot, you believe in conspiracy theory. There is no evidence at all. Like the officials, everybody ruled out the pilot. Everybody did. It's just conspiracy theorists on the internet with no evidence, just making up fake stories to cope with the fact that like they can't explain how a plane the size of a city block just vanished off the planet in 2014.
So where did it go?
Yeah, and so this is the part too where like I know the United States government, I wouldn't even have to have videos of the orbiting of the plane to know the United States government 100%, beyond any shadow of a doubt, knows exactly what happened to this plane. So even if you're somebody who's like, I don't want to believe in orbs and what have you, realize there's no doubt, none at all, that the United States government knows what happened. We have a system called SBIRS, which is scanning the whole planet. Satellites are not real time. It's not a situation where, oh, we just missed it. It was in our blind spot. That's not a thing. If this plane crashed in the ocean, there's going to be a debris field. Even if we don't see it immediately, we're going to go back to our satellite system and we're going to, oh, there's the debris right there. It was on, from yesterday or 3 days ago or whatever. It would have been seen. There's a SOSA system that can detect the Titan sub. Actually, the video just dropped yesterday of the broken up Titan sub off near the Titanic. The Navy heard the sub implode the moment it happened. They let all the news stations lie about it for 5 days. And then they said, oh, yeah, we knew it imploded immediately. These news stations have oxygen counters. The families are sitting there going, we have to send a rescue operation to save the people. And the Navy knew they were all dead. They knew they were all dead. So there also was a Cardiff University study. They looked at these acoustic systems, the ones in Diego Garcia in Western Australia, and along the entire flight path, they checked all the acoustic detections. There's nothing consistent with a plane crashing into the ocean. And they even did the math to show the energy levels, even on a slow descent, would still be detected. Nothing anywhere along the flight path. There's only one detection on one acoustic detector almost an hour after the plane would have already ran out of fuel. You can just do basic math and logic. So it's the evidence is overwhelming that there's no chance that it ended there. And then we also have over the horizon radars. We have Pine Gap Military Base, Diego Garcia. They would have been able to track the plane from takeoff. So you're trying to tell me they just weren't tracking a Boeing 777 flying for 8 hours? And people are going to say, well, what about this debris? You said earlier that no debris was found, but I'm reading in the news, it says debris was found. Again, the official search found nothing. And a year later, debris starts to wash ashore. It gets found. We don't know actually when it washed ashore in Africa. This is the wrong continent. Realize that based on this crash site location that they think in the South Indian Ocean, the debris should have washed ashore in Western Australia. The currents flow to the east down there. And then they kind of flow up and around and then they go all the way back. It's actually physically impossible. Physically impossible. There's no explanation possible for how the debris got to Africa if that crash site location is correct. Anywhere near that crash site. The plane, either you believe the debris in Africa is from MH370, or you believe that the plane crashed in the South Indian Ocean. It's either or. It cannot be both. It's physically not possible to be both. So, what's a better location for the debris to have gotten in the ocean if this debris is from MH370 in Africa? The Maldives. If you look at a ocean current map of the Maldives, you'll realize that it actually is perfect to flow over and go to the Reunion Island and to Africa and all these other places it was found. Well, what's in the Maldives? Diego Garcia military base, United States military base that we lease out from the British. And this is where, if you look into the conspiracy theories from when the plane disappeared, this is where everybody was saying it went. The Malaysian people still, they trolled the base on Google Map and Google Earth. You can go look, and they've tagged a picture of the plane there. There's a bunch of theories think that the plane was remote controlled there, which there could be a remote control aspect to this story. I'm certainly not ruling it out. And that's the only place where you could hide the plane. Because where else are you going to send it? Some people think it went to Russia. Well, there's like dozens and dozens of radars that would have seen it. This plane also cannot land at a commercial airport without being detected. So for the people that think that MH370 was turned into MH17, which was another tragedy that happened a few months later, sorry, that didn't happen, guys. Not everything in this universe is connected together. Some things are, but not everything. It's not possible to take a commercial airliner, land it at a commercial airport without anybody realizing, full of dead bodies that are stinking for months and months and months. That's not thing that happened. There was a bunch of eyewitnesses in the Maldives that saw the plane in the early morning hours flying south towards Diego Garcia on a small island, like 15 of them, not just like one or two either. They saw the red and white stripe of Malaysian Airlines on the jumbo jet. I mean, again, this plane is one of the biggest planes that are out there, Boeing 777. And there was a fire suppression device that washes it up in the Maldives. Neither of these things are investigated at all. Like, the officials just say, nope, ignore that. We're not going to look into it. And you're like, why would you not? They're like, this is the middle of the ocean, right near where we think this plane disappeared. Nope. And then Philip Wood on 4chan. Now, this is the hardest thing to explain, but he posts a picture on a 4chan board, and so it's a black picture. And he says, I'm Philip Wood. I've been held prisoner by some military personnel. I feel like I've been drugged. I can't think clearly. This was, I think, about 10 days after the plane disappeared. People immediately look, first of all, they realize like this guy was on MH370. They look up his name, Philip Wood. And then they look at the picture and they look at the metadata in the picture, and it's got coordinates of Diego Garcia. And then we find out as well, Diego Garcia is also a CIA black site where we transferred prisoners through there as well. So we know there are cells of some sort. In fact, some refugees washed ashore a few years ago, like 2020. They were on a boat and they washed ashore on Diego Garcia accidentally. And they've been held prisoner ever since. It's like a humanitarian crisis right now. They're not allowed to leave. So, and then one more thing too, if that's not enough, also around 2020, people started going to the Facebook page of Diego Garcia, and they started unusually seeing people that look extremely similar to the crew of MH370. Like if you age them up, like 6 or 7 years. I don't really talk about this as much because you get a lot of flack when you start to dig into this kind of things. But you look at the pictures, and some of them are, it's kind of a stretch. Others are like, looks pretty damn similar. So people say, what do you think happened to the people? Personally, I think that most of the people died. So if you are a family member, I want to send my condolences that the lithium ion battery fire itself probably took out most of the people on board the plane. I actually don't think that the wormhole would kill people. It's the fire that would have killed people. If anybody did live, then either they become wards of the state right away. So either you can never leave Diego Garcia, that's your new home. You go into witness protection and say goodbye to your old life. You're never going to talk to anybody your old life ever again. Or the dark option is that you get a water bottle and you drink the water bottle and you go to sleep and you don't wake up ever again. Truthfully, I can't know exactly what happened because I'm not psychic. I don't pretend to be psychic. I also don't pretend to know all the motivations of why the US government perpetuated this. I'm just showing you guys the evidence and going, US government is implicated. They're the ones that we should be demanding answers from. If you want answers, the people you should go to, I'm just going to name them for you right now. Former President Barack Obama, he would have to have known. He would have had to help cover it up after the fact. Former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, 100% he knows. Former CIA Director John Brennan, he knows as well. Current Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines, she was like the deputy director at the time. She was the one that was justifying us drone striking innocent people in Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan under Obama. She knows as well. President Biden, I'm sure he knows as well. You can see that they keep this information in the family that's out there. With respect to other lawmakers, Congress basically has no idea. I wouldn't even be surprised if nobody in Congress knows. They generally are not privileged. Senate Intelligence Committee are the ones that you want to look into. It's not a surprise the Senate Intelligence Committee are the ones that are talking about UFOs and this UFO disclosure bill they're trying to pass in the Senate. Chuck Schumer, he knows. Marco Rubio, he knows. These guys know, but they also know the implications, which is they know how dangerous this is. So for them, they probably have moral quandaries as well. Like, yes, they would love to probably say and tell the truth, but at the same time, they don't want the world to end. They don't want somebody to be able to make a dirty black hole bomb that wipes us all out. So there you go. I've laid it all out there. If I disappear, pick up the reins and take it for me, guys.
Oh man. And this is where I think Lauren's question would have been based around because she had the misfortune, in my eyes, to watch that drama series Manifest with her mother. That was like their kind of guilty pleasure TV. And that is just weird, man, because like, you know, they always tell you what they're going to do, right? And this literally is the script of what you just described. I mean, certain members of that plane end up on a military base and they feel as though they're being played with mentally, psyoped and drugged. And have you ever watched it? Had the misfortune to see this thing?
Wait, they end up on a military base? No, I never watched
Oh,
it.
yeah, it's okay. Here's one for you. It's called Manifest. It started on NBC,
Oh, this is
and they
weird.
were like 3 seasons deep on NBC, and it was going really well. And the producer had contract for goodness knows, and the writers were in place for goodness knows how many more seasons. And all of a sudden, it gets cancelled. So it started Manifest September 2018, randomly gets cancelled in 2021 until the White Knight Netflix rolls in and picks up the series, and says, "Don't worry, we will put the existing seasons onto Netflix, and we will fund the rest so we can get the other 3 to 4 seasons out there." And I mean, look, if you want to gaslight a globe, you're not going to do it on NBC, right? With this story, but you can do it on Netflix. So there's something there as well. And but it's exact same story. How they enter this vortex and they turn up 7 years later, and then they just go home. Some of them aren't, end up on an airbase, and the others that go home to family that have mourned them, moved on with
Or
their
moved
lives,
on. Yeah.
remarried, and they just turn up like, what the hell's going on? Like, you know, I'm home. Yay, just got off the flight.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if somebody like made this show having speculated about what could have happened. Now when it comes to the real world, it wouldn't surprise me, like art imitates life in a lot of situations. But and when you start dealing with time like this, there is this idea of superposition where something can be held in superposition, so it could show up later on. But and this idea of time dilation as well, these are real concepts in physics and quantum mechanics. But based on the Islanders seeing the plane, going to Diego Garcia. I don't think this plane went to the future. I don't think it's going to show up anytime in the future. I think that if it did, even if it got teleported, which is what I think happens there in this wormhole event, it's showing up pretty like maybe at most an hour or two later, but it's not showing up years and years and years
Mm-hmm.
later. Um, but yeah, again, I don't know 100% for sure, but yeah, I think that that's pretty weird with the manifest show. I've never seen it, but there's
Yeah.
also Lost as well. People bring up, and there you see a lot of this because the science gets out there, and also sometimes information gets out there, and it gets out there as a rumor, but sometimes it can be true as well. So people had speculated all this stuff about going to the military base, and even Don Lemon famously talked about the plane disappearing through a black hole. So people had these ideas in their head that are out there. If you really want to know about what shows are the most accurate, Star Trek. Star Trek had basically everything you see in Star Trek is real. Everything. Wormholes, warp drives, replicators we'll probably be able to have at some point in the future, not immediately, but when you talk about pulling this energy out of the ether, you can actually just conjure essentially elements from this, like hydrogen, the most simple elements. And then from there, these balls of plasma can actually cause transmutation to occur. So you can actually have alchemy happen. And this is actually what happens in the sun. This is where we get all of our elements is from the sun, fusion reactions. So if you can do that on a small scale, which we can, and the proof is also sonoluminescence, is a similar concept, then you can create any element we need. So replicators are possible. I don't think you're going to have teleportation like transporter teleportation, although you can probably do that because it's like a replicator, but you would want to do that to like a coffee cup. You wouldn't want to do that to like a living being because presumably you're not going to be you anymore when you come around on the other side. But, doing a wormhole is also teleportation as well. So that's the show that I think people should be looking at if you want to figure out like what does the future hold for us.
Mm. All right, man. Well, I've kept you over time, but I do want to have you back because we didn't even touch too much on your work around zero point energy, and I know you are working to invent something yourself. And then I wanted to link that into Bitcoin mining, but we can do that another day. And also, we didn't even touch on the letter to Ashton Forbes. I might I might even I've got a recording of it. I wanted to listen to the recording with you and watch your reaction. So perhaps we'll save that for another time if you're willing to come back on because there's
No, yeah.
so much we didn't touch on Randall Carlson, Malcolm Bendel too much either. Um,
Yeah, let's
because
do a part two in the future, and then we can go over that stuff. And I think that the Bitcoin stuff is really interesting as well with respect to the free energy idea, because it's like, well, can you mine Bitcoin with that? And
Mhm,
as a little tease, what I would tell people is I used to play a lot of video games when I was younger. If there's a way to cheat, there's people out there that are cheating all the
mhm,
time.
of course.
So if free energy is possible and over Unity devices are possible, and I know for a fact that they are and that people
Yeah.
have them, then people are using them to mine Bitcoin. And that's being baked into the price already. So you're competing against people when you're mining Bitcoin that already have a leg up on you. So
Hmm.
just keep that in mind.
Yes. No, I want. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. So okay. To round it off, if this is stolen science, when did this? When do you think, in your opinion, it was discovered, and who do you think stole it?
Yeah, I think the origin of it, I'm less and less sure about as time goes on. The more I dig into it, some people are going to say this is reverse engineered from aliens. Some people are going to say that previous civilizations had this. This science is discovery, not an invention. So this means that you don't have to have some requirements to figure it out. You just have to look at the world the right way. Like you just realize there's not nothing out there. There's this sea of energy that's out there. And then there's different ways to potentially tap into it. Now, of course, the more advanced your material science, the easier it gets. And the more you can make a microchip that's the size of your nail and you can scale it down, the more advanced it can get as well. Um, so I don't truthfully know. I think that when it comes to scenarios for me of the whole non-human stuff or where it comes from, I think my big three are probably that we're either on some kind of prison planet where we're like, we are the aliens and we're like the Australia of the past where they sent the convicts to the isolated island and they just let those people go and have that little island. The second one I think is the most is that AI has already figured out everything, and they're already controlling us. AI is controlling us in a manipulative way that we don't even realize it's happening. It's already achieved singularity and sentience. Um, and then the third option would be future humans, that when you start messing around with time, there's this idea of retrocausality, which is that information from the future can get sent to the present. And if that's possible, we could actually have like be telling ourselves how to produce this technology. And then I do love the ancient history stuff. I've always just loved it. But like the idea that like the pyramid is a power plant and that they figured this stuff out back then. And how did they build the pyramids or Stonehenge or Göbekli Tepe and these other ancient civilizations? So for that, truthfully, I feel like I've done enough if I just bring people like the biggest secret super weapon in the history of the world and the mystery of the missing plane and free energy. Like that's enough for me for this life, and I'm just gonna let other people figure out like where did it all come from after that, you know?
Yeah, okay. We definitely got to do a part two then. Okay, where should people come and find you if they want to get in touch or watch or listen to any more of your work?
Yeah, and popularity has grown rapidly. Easiest way to interact is definitely on X, at just X Ashton. You can just type my name in. You can find me very easily as well there. All the MH370 stuff is highlighted in my highlights, going back even to the very beginning a year ago. I don't highlight anything that's not related to MH370, including a lot of my interviews you can find out there as well if you want to look at some of them. I've done over 100 podcasts. I've been doing live streams at least 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 7 p.m. Central United States time, about the plane, secret science, and free energy. And then I am going to start actually posting on Instagram and on TikTok. As much as I hate it, I won't be interacting there, but I'm going to start posting videos there as well for people just to bring more attention to the case. So you can find me in those
Okay,
places, guys.
cool. Have you ever received Bitcoin, Ashton?
No, never received any Bitcoin before.
Okay, we're going to jump here, and I'm going to send you some, so you can have your first little taste for a Bitcoin. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Cheers.